Why buy just a video game from Atari or Intellivision? Invest in the wonder computer of the 1980s for under $300. The Commodore VIC-20. Unlike games, it has a real computer keyboard. With the Commodore VIC-20, the whole family can learn computing at home. Plays great games, too. Under $300, the wonder computer of the 1980s, the Commodore VIC-20.
Coming soon, Commodore brings you Gorf, the Wonder arcade game, and Omega Race in home versions.
If I had to look back and try to point at some tech that influenced me the most, I'd have to credit the Commodore VIC-20. Back in 1981, men were men and everything was ambiguously gay, and the first really affordable home computer came along. I say affordable, but really it was $300, which was a titanic sum of cash at the time. I can imagine my dad purchasing that and getting into a galactic argument with my mom about wasting money on electronics.
It's sort of like Pac-Man.
Do you know what the name of this game is?
It's Galaxy Crunchers.
Cosmic Cruncher. How long do you think you could play this game before getting bored?
About 15 minutes.
Who do you think was president when this game came out?
Theodore Roosevelt?
Theodore Roosevelt?
No.
That's a good guess. Do you think this game is a rip-off of Pac-Man?
Yeah. But it is fun.
So, how do the graphics on this compare to modern games?
Oh, this one's poor.
Do you think this game came out before or after man landed on the moon?
By the graphics, by this before.
They're green and gross, and they're kind of small, and they're really nasty, especially when they're really gross.
Dad was always spending cash on the latest and greatest technology. I remember later him buying an Epson dot matrix printer for $2,000. The VIC-20 was totally badass, and you could really tell it was made by a programmer and not cooked up by a bunch of marketing dweebs. Even the name was functional. VIC stood for the Video Interface Chip, which was the new color interface. It was a smash hit, in-your-face graphics processor that boasted a whole 5K of RAM, 3 of which was available to the programmer. The system used memory carts that you could insert into the machine and then turn on, and then it would boot to that game. If you did not put in a cartridge, it would instead boot to a programmable BASIC interface.
Do you like this game?
It's okay.
How long do you think you can play this game before it starts to get boring?
Quite a bit.
Do you know what game this is?
No.
That's called Home Babysitter. Do you feel like if your mother and I were to go out, we could just leave you here with this game to play it? And then everything would be safe for you?
Yeah.
This, a little bit that. A little bit this, a little that. A little bit this, a little bit that. A little bit this, a little bit that.
Not only could a kid like me play games, I could actually write my own code. I think the first program was just me printing the word poop on the screen. From there I went to make on an infinite loop ASCII picture of a stick figure doing jumping jacks. After that I followed different programming guides to build 700 plus line of code monstrosities. I remember writing a game called Pio that was the bee's knees. Of course, there wasn't really an effective way to save your code. The only option was to plug in this weird blue converter box into the VIC-20 that would allow you to save your program onto an audio cassette. This is a process that could take up to an hour to save or to load. Remember that the next time you're upset, it takes you 5 seconds to save your Word document to that USB key. Anyways, I remember I had this blue audio tape from the Bangles that had the song Walk Like an Egyptian on it. I loved that song. It was so awesome. But my code was awesomer, so I jammed a paper wad into the write protection tab and recorded over the Bangles. Now, an interesting thing happened when I played that audio tape back in my Walkman. The coolest whirs and dings and beeps came through. So when I heard that sound again in 1994 when I made my first modem connection, I fully recognize computer speak.
What's this game called?
Dwarf.
What did you say?
Dwarf. Dwarf. Dwarf.
So, do you like this game?
They're better than the last one, but but worse than the first. Well, the first one was bad, but
What did you say?
okay, they were better. Okay, they were better than the first. This one's graphics is better than, but way better than the last, but better than the last. Better, way better than the last, but it's not really good.
Can modern pseudo-retro games like Minecraft ever achieve authentic play experiences like this?
No, because they're you only kill each other in games.
A couple of later, it was 24 hours. There's a wrapped up umbrella. It was not an umbrella. It was actually, instead, it was a vampire.
Now you could buy different licensed peripherals for the VIC-20, but it turns out all the Atari stuff worked on it. They used the exact same COM ports. So that's what my dad did. He bought all the Atari joysticks and paddles. I'm not sure what the retail price was on game carts, but we had a bunch of them. You know, all this time later, the only ones I remember for sure having was a game called Home Babysitter, Gorf, Omega Race, Cosmic Cruncher, and some great-great-great-grandparent to Arkanoid. My dad must have spent a fortune on those games, and actually, one of my earliest childhood memories was going to Kmart with my dad and looking in the electronics section for game carts. At the time, there wasn't a dedicated electronics section in the store, but I remember there was like an aisle that had a couple of games on it. In those days, it seemed like every game was a clone or a rip-off of another game. There wasn't a whole lot of new content coming out, and a lot of that was because of the restrictions on capabilities of the machines. Sometimes when somebody would try something new, the game would totally bomb. For example, Home Babysitter. Holy crap, this game is terrible. Every time you went through the menu screen, you had to sit there for 15 seconds while it played the animation. Then when you select, say, the alphabet mode, the screen just goes white and doesn't say anything. How the heck are you supposed to know you're supposed to start hitting the letter keys? Hey, like I said, there was almost no memory available for the programmers, so there was absolutely no intricate level designs. I remember reading a game theory book that talked about how you can keep players interested in your game. Basically, according to the book, you had 3 ways to make your game hold interest longer than 5 seconds. 1 is make the AI smarter, which is a very difficult thing to do. 2 is to make the computer faster, and 3 is to make the player's controls less responsive or slower. In other words, just force the player to do the same thing over and over and over, just make it harder and harder conditions. A great example of this is the game Gorf. Man, I love that game, and it was a rip-off of 4 other arcade games put into one. There was just 4 stages looped over and over and over. You started out on the first loop as a space cadet, and then on the second playthrough, all the stuff moved a little bit faster, and they called you a space captain. I remember one time getting so far in the game it called me a galactic admiral, and I thought that was a great title I'd really like to have someday. Another unique feature of this game is that you could only fire 1 bullet at a time. So once you press the fire key, you are really committed to that shot. If you hit the fire key again, your first projectile would disappear and a new one would take its place. The physics of this makes no sense whatsoever, but it did make for fun and unique gameplay. I also loved how it informed you that the game was over. It gave you your title, like the Galactic Admiral, and then it says, "Bites the dust." That is epic. And for the record, the game looked nothing like it did on the Shatner commercial, but the Omega Race did look exactly like that. The VIC-20 was totally awesome, and I played it heavily until we purchased an NES around 1986. Even then, I still fired up that old system to try making different programs I had ideas for.
All right, Era, Omega Race takes place in 2003. Do you remember the year 2003?
Yes.
Do you remember our galactic fleet defending the solar system from droids back then?
No.
Okay, what game are you playing right now?
Omega Race.
And do you like this game?
It's hard, yeah.
You said it's hard. I asked you if you like this game.
Yeah, I like it.
How long do you think you could play this game before you get bored of it? How many minutes do you think you can play before you get bored?
Probably 10 minutes.
Have you beat the first stage yet?